And hello, my fellow ninjas. It's me, Jonathan, Director of Community. Thank you, Robert, Chris, Karsten, for giving us flack. I know you got places to be. You're busy people. We get it. We appreciate your time. This is going to be a good one though. So welcome to another Like a Ninja live stream. Very excited about this one because it's been in the making for a while. We have a very special guest. He's one of you, everybody. He is NinjaOne, one of NinjaOne's IT team. We have Nick Lush. Nick, you are a senior manager at NinjaOne, and I'm so excited that you agreed to come on here because you all not only are our internal IT team, you also are NinjaOne users. You use Ninja to do various things with managing our own environment. I'm pretty sure that I probably have irritated you by not submitting a ticket and just slacking you a couple of times. And I'm pretty sure you've helped me out of a couple of things. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for being an awesome IT support person. And today you're going to be joining us to walk through, when we were talking about topics, you mentioned there's a few things that you use, your team uses Ninja to do, and we were thinking about what topics could be cool to go through. And onboarding and offboarding users is one that, of course, everybody has to deal with. So it seemed like a good one to start with. So thanks for coming on and joining us. Maybe before we dive in, you want to share like a little bit of background, how long you've been at Ninja, kind of your background before Ninja and everything,
Sure.
so people can get to know you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I came to Ninja in 2021. For just kind of starting off, much smaller than we are now. I came from a couple of smaller industries before then. Some mixture of enterprise and kind of MSP flavor too. So I was familiar with the needs of big business, but also like the complexities of small business too. So I came to Ninja because I was really looking for a challenge. I had configured everything the way that I felt it needed to be. Users were well supported. Everything was good to go, and I was honestly getting bored. And so I came to Ninja because I knew that the experience here, and I knew all the needs of corporate America and business were something I was very interested in. So I decided to jump in and accept the challenge, and it's been awesome. It's every day is growth, every day is new experiences. I'm still constantly learning even in my role. So it's been really awesome.
That's great. And so, I mean, you've seen a lot of change. So,
Mm-hmm.
2021, so 3 years. I mean, do you remember roughly what size Ninja was at? Probably half of what we are now, at least.
Even less. So I think I was like hopefully 260 something maybe,
Okay.
or something around there. And so yeah, the size we are now, I mean it's more than double, and the needs have grown, and then also just the scale and the scope of everything grows. So to have we call it eating our own dog food, using the platform itself, to have that scalability and that like connection and touch with all different remote endpoints, whether they're on-prem and you're not there, or they're literally hybrid users, which is very popular nowadays, is awesome to have that at our fingertips.
And now, had you had experience with Ninja or any other software like Ninja before coming here?
So before I came to Ninja, I had experimented and used Pulseway before. So like I was familiar with kind of the concept, the tool set, and the functions, but I had never used Ninja before.
Gotcha. And when you joined, so I mean, 250 now for those keeping score at home, I think it's something crazy like 1,500 or something like that. It's wild. And I guess we've always been distributed. There's the Austin office, there's folks in Tampa, there's folks in Berlin, and also Sydney now too. But I mean, you've
Mhm.
seen not only the growth in terms of just strict head count, but new locations popping up. And of course, there's
Mhm.
always been a lot of remote people. Was that something that was new to you too when you were coming in?
Kind of, yeah. I'd say 90% or more of the users I was used to supporting were like on-prem. We had some options for people to work from home, but it wasn't as hybrid, especially since it was post-COVID, and that was such an explosion of like that need for work from home. It was definitely a new challenge for me.
Awesome. Well, one last question, then let's get into it, because I know folks are excited to see. And as always, folks, we use this time. You're going to have access to Nick. He's going to be sharing some cool stuff. Ask him questions. Also, we want to hear from you. You all are rolling out. You have your own onboarding and offboarding processes. A lot of you folks are on in the Discord, and you're sharing and responding people. Such a good resource. If you're not a member of the Discord, as always, check it out. It's a really great resource, and lots of really smart people sharing how they do things, answering questions. Plus, you get access to internal Ninja folks. So definitely something to do. But before we dive into the onboarding and offboarding process that you guys have developed and are utilizing, Nick, one last question, and that is, joining Ninja. We talked about the overall headcount. What about your IT team? Just to give folks some additional context. I mean, we've got some MSPs on the line. We've got internal IT folks that are either one man or one person operations, or they have a larger team. So what about you? I mean, I imagine it's changed over the time that you've been here too.
Yeah, a lot for sure. When I started, it was me and two other like service desk agents that we had, and that was still like 200 people as we went to 300-400, and we had to figure out and scale quickly with that. The nice thing about Ninja was that it gave us that option to build in automations and do some of that manual work that we didn't actually go touch a computer for. Also, like remotely remediate all those things. But it's definitely something that is a challenge. And I know most IT departments, especially probably MSP and startups and smaller enterprise, are usually a deficit. Even if you're running 1 to 100 or 1 to 150 or 1 to 200, depending on the scope of the applications that you have to manage, the infrastructure, are you like local Active Directory, all of those things factor into the bandwidth that's needed for an IT team. So it can be a struggle, but the platform makes it really awesome.
Well, that's cool. Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, folks, this is I've been excited about this. I thought people would be interested in seeing like, hey, Ninja has an IT team and they're supporting an org that has grown like crazy. These demands have definitely skyrocketed on your team and everything. So if you have any other questions that I didn't just ask, put them in the chat. Definitely ask, and we'll tee Nick up for them. But Nick, with that, let's dive into the topic of the day: user onboarding, offboarding. I'll just hand it over to you. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So presents both onboarding and offboarding present their own challenges, especially at scale. There's a lot of manual work that goes into user creation. And then there's a lot of like compliance and security stuff that's related to like the offboarding side of things. So what typically ends up happening, I'm sure MSPs see this a lot, maybe corporate or internal IT has already, existing processes, or maybe they have access to more enterprise level services. But I mean, if you're just using Ninja itself, some of the task work can be reduced that you normally have to like touch an endpoint for, or configure an endpoint, or even have a service account on the device to help you with like admin work and stuff. So I'd actually really be curious, if there's questions about people, like maybe some struggles they had, or some things that they're working with. I'd be really interested in kind of go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me, I'm trying to toggle this here. There we go. All right. I don't want my giant face taking over the whole screen. Well, yeah, I mean, this is a topic that obviously we've covered sometimes before. I wanted to share one thing, and now seems like a good time to do it. We've done a webinar with Jeff Hunter, who does basically all the webinars. He's a Ninja wizard. I'm going to drop a link into it for anyone who wants to go a little bit dive deeper into a demo using Ninja. Yeah, like Nick said, I mean, curious to know from others, if you have an established process that's documenting kind of like the approaches that you're using. So let's make this a conversation. But Nick, going back to that point, yeah, you want to share a little bit more about kind of the just kind of the run through and maybe how you guys have approached it and developed this process and how it's been updated maybe.
Sure. Yeah. So when I first started, when we were deploying laptops out into the field or preparing them, for on-premise folks, it was, a lot of work. Crack the laptop open, you go to log in, you got to set up, user accounts. There's other ways to like auto provision things, and get endpoints ready through more scripted base. But, from that base level, just kind of starting out, figuring out everything, there was a lot of manual touching the device, having to go through, you know, install applications. And, before we started to really leverage the product, it was just a lot of repeat work over and over and over again. The really nice thing about Ninja, and that really alleviates that kind of pain, is, once you add a device into an organization and apply a policy to it, you can then leverage, the conditions to script-based install applications. So that could be either, directly out of the native application library. You can get super creative with, leveraging like Homebrew and Chocolatey to pull down from public repos and install, and even really super advanced scripted PowerShell installs. All that stuff, you can get so deep into it if you want. But it's also, a lot of the base apps are included in the native library itself. So, you have that part of it. You have the user provisioning part, which is, less within the actual Ninja platform itself. But it still is useful, because you can name it, you can understand whose endpoint it is. You can even find ways to go in and add a department variable into there to understand, like, okay, I know this, our support department has a very specific set of applications that they have to have installed. One of the cool things that we do is we have an API integration with Azure AD. And so we pull in, once the endpoint is actually brought into Ninja, we pull in a variable for department. And we use that stored inside a custom field to then push that script, or that, pull that condition to install all those apps in one, foul swoop. So once those support users get logged in, they start, maybe open up their web browser, get logged into the identity provider. In the background, all those apps are already installing and being provisioned for them. So there's no manual process on their side. There's no manual process on the IT side. We just verify, and we have, alerts set up if any of the scripts happen to fail.
Gotcha. And do you have like basically your checklist? Is it the same for everybody? Are there different cohorts of people and different how standard, I guess, is your process?
So across the board, the process starts, essentially the same. We get a ticket in from HR saying, hey, there's a new person starting. They're starting on this day. And then, we go through our user provisioning process. And then we go through, the app access assignment processes. The install process is when the endpoint is actually brought online. And, outside of Ninja, we leverage other tools like Identity Provider, Okta, for skim provisioning and stuff like that. And those are actually what's also driving the application groups that we're adding Ninjas to. But across the board, when we have standards set, we have our baseline, these are the apps that all Ninjas have, because this is what they need to do business: communication tools, telephony, direct messaging tools, all those type of things. And then we have different flavors of Ninjas, right? So maybe the marketing team has some different tools that maybe the sales team has. The support team has their own engineers, engineering, QA and development, they have their own subset of tools. And then you got IT and everywhere else. So role-based access becomes really important to understand, who gets what and who gets provisioned what. And yeah.
What do you think have been some of the headaches or challenges, especially, I mean, again, like we're talking about you joining in 2021, the org has changed, your team has changed, Ninja itself has changed too. Were there any kind of challenges or headaches that you guys have solved?
Expansive growth, explosive growth, for sure. Having to provision devices, hardware in different regions where you don't have local support is a challenge. You have multiple vendors that you end up having to collaborate with if you don't have a global solution. You have to time that out You have to make sure you're coordinating with your recruiting department to understand like when are ninjas coming on board. How do you have to have that hardware prepared? All of those things is super critical. And a lot of times it comes back on IT, especially if you don't have a super mature, procurement department or something. It all kind of comes back on IT. So really getting hardware is a challenge, and it takes a lot of effort to kind of put into that.
Yeah, I mean, I know that that's something that really, I mean, since the pandemic, I mean, people have been complaining about, right? And I mean, I don't know that it's gotten any better, really. I know it's a big challenge that a lot of folks talk about.
Mm-hmm. Especially different regions too. So it depends. Each region has their own import export rules, all those type of things. But I mean, even just provisioning at scale, it's one of the difficulties. I know that IT across the board runs into is like knowing, trying to project to understand how much hardware you need to have in stock.
Yeah, absolutely. And then maybe I don't know if we want to jump ahead to like offboarding or the switch there too. I mean, getting hardware back, being able to
Mm-hmm.
reprovision it and everything too. I mean, that's a whole nother process.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a sensitive process, right? That's another one of the things that like is a kind of a specialty in IT. We're usually involved in that process more so than others. Oftentimes we get a heads up, and we have to be prepared. And there's definitely challenges that if it's on-prem, if it's a remote person, that coordination between HR and IT is super critical. But it also is an advantage having Ninja, because some of the scripts that you can run, you can almost deploy kind of like an action plan for lock the screen, lock the user account out, all these type of things that help you feel like the security of that the endpoint that's not in front of you is being is being locked down. And then that coordination to get hardware back can be a difficult thing. And then when you get it back, having to make sure it's wiped securely. There's a lot of different compliance and security frameworks that come into play. If you're decommissioning devices, you have to make sure you get like a certificate of destruction, all that fun stuff.
Is there anything that you all have figured out to make that easier at all?
There's a lot of different ways you can get very creative within Ninja to script base, do things to help the IT person ensure like a smooth or a secure offboarding. But one of the kind of challenges is with Windows and with Mac, it really kind of comes down to MDM is the key. To have the core, baseline core control of the endpoint and be able to actually do remote wipes and refreshes from an MDM perspective really gives you a higher level of control. But there are various ways you can get creative with Ninja to kind of almost replicate that, but not the exact way that an MDM or an EMM technically.
Yeah, I mean MDM. I love. I had to pull this up from Chris. This is pretty great. Wait, new cover band. I have to know what are you covering? That's the real question.
That is a great question, actually. I'm curious. Sounds like a hair metal band.
Oh yeah. Great album name, if nothing else. Yeah, I mean the MDM obviously something that is being rapidly developed. Launched pretty recently over the summer. I don't know if you guys are using it yet or not, or if it's still too early for you. But yeah, iOS, Android, not Mac OS yet, which a lot of people have been pointing out and they're eagerly waiting for. But we just launched multi-tenancy for it too. So if you weren't in the Discord or you haven't heard that yet, and you knew that Ninja launched MDM, something that was holding some folks back, especially on the MSP side, was the lack of the ability to set up multiple connections. And now that's addressed. So you should talk to your account manager if that's something that you want to look into. Okay, cool. But going back to what we wanted to share here today, Nick, any other things that you, I guess, saw as kind of like tips or advice for folks listening, I mean, we've got a lot of power users who have some pretty well-tuned, processes of their own. And for you all listening in, I mean, yeah, any other questions for Nick? I'll ask one more time. Take advantage of this time. You can ask him anything. We can put him on the spot here. But while we're waiting for that, Nick, yeah, any other kind of like pointers or advice or things that you wanted to share about what you guys have learned and how to improve the process?
Sure. Yeah. I'll throw a really spicy topic out there: change management.
Okay.
Yeah. I learned, and our team learned some important lessons on when to change, how to change, and not only the communication aspect of it, but also testing and validation. Right. So let's say you're making an adjustment to a policy that's removing or installing an application, even if that's Adobe Acrobat. If you do it to one of the orgs that includes all of the computers, or a policy that's applied to all Windows devices, and then overnight everybody gets Adobe installed, and they're like, "What is going on?" Although it's not a nefarious issue, it still is a lot of questions. You can actually lose some confidence from your users because it looks like you don't know what you're doing, even though it was a minute change. So something we learned and had to implement very thoughtfully was like a proper change management plan to identify what's changing, what are the risks, what's the backout plan, and then like what's the testing validation process.
Do tell more, because like, yeah, I mean, this is something I have seen folks inadvertently rolling out security software everywhere, or various other things too. I mean, this is definitely something that happens. But yeah, anything else you can share about that what you've put together there?
Yeah. So at large, it's not just for Ninja changes too. Typically we have you have standard and emergency changes and normal changes. Emergency is like, it's broken, it needs to be fixed now. Let's document as we're making the fix, and then go back and do basically like a recap or a retro. Like a normal change would be something that is already expected, it's pre-approved, and like a standard change is something you're going through and you're actually getting the approval for. On a team where a lot of people have a lot of different permissions, depending on your size and your scope, maybe MSPs, there might be, almost everybody has sysadmin. There's not necessarily roles delegated out for, I can only touch this level of thing in Ninja. It is important to have that pass through and understand, this is going to affect more than one user. We need to evaluate this, understand the impact of it, and plan for the change. Because, I always tell my guys, like, we can't just YOLO everything. So it's good. It takes a little while for everybody to adjust to, especially if you're used to having a lot of controls and you're used to being able to act on the fly. It almost seems like it slows the process down. But to be honest, it speeds everything up, and it really adds to that trust level that you have from the users, which is very easily lost and takes a lot of time to gain back.
Thanks for that. Yeah, we've got some funny comments here. Robin's throwing me some shade, saying, "How do you deal with users like Jonathan who go rogue but need to move quickly?" Come on, Robin. What? Don't go rogue. Well, okay, let's table that for a second. Going back to the you're bringing up something that's pretty interesting, and it's something that, even though I don't work in IT, I'm in marketing, I struggle with this, right? Like that switching the mindset to making things scalable means having an established process, keeping it updated, keeping documentation updated. How much, and while at the same time having to do your day-to-day job, right? Like actually having to do all that. So anything that you've specifically, I guess, through onboarding and offboarding, maybe that's a good specific example. Like, do you all have time set to when you're going to kind of review that process or make changes to it? It just seems like it'd be very easy to get caught up in the day-to-day, all the tasks need to be done. And who has time to plan, or who has time to make changes to these things?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. Especially, I mean, things change all the time. Um, uh, as maybe new titles are created, or maybe new groups or new teams are spun up. It's not often completely communicated across. So you might, as IT, find out, oh, I didn't know this is a title, or oh, this is a new set of applications that we have to install. And so there is an amount of pre-work that you can do, if you have the team for it, and kind of at least a monthly basis, as you're doing some type of kind of like retro on what's gone on. Maybe looking back through onboarding tickets, if there was any blockers or struggles, what were the cause of those type of things. Then you can kind of plan and post. But it depends on the communication across the teams, right? And it also depends on the bandwidth that you have. So if you're a smaller team, maybe the communications aren't that great. Sometimes you're just kind of having to fix stuff in post or react on the fly. And the documentation and the follow-up part is really important. What I like to try to push on my team is, let's at least record it on the fly. If you're in the middle of an incident, or you're in the middle of doing something, I don't expect you to create the entire 5-page document on maybe a new process, but we have to record it. And then we have to have a period of time where we go back and at least look at those and prioritize what needs to be flushed out more. Because especially in a ticket queue based operation, the last thing you want to do is have to try to do the same task 50 times, or try to hunt down that information while everybody else is doing things and everything's on fire. So at least if there's an anchor point somewhere that you can find and understand, okay, here's the ticket that helped me do that thing. And then, within a regular cadence, kind of go back and add to that documentation. I mean, that's a better practice than, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to your point, right? In the moment, it can kind of seem like, okay, I don't have time for this, or it's taking away time, but it's actually going to make things move faster in the long run.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. You're investing, 5 to 20 minutes to not have to spend hours in the future.
Your future self thanks you.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, being kind to your future self. What about this question just popped up? For onboarding, again, like applying it to this specific topic. Do you guys have are you measuring it all? Like, do you have goals around onboarding that you're kind of like tracking success around at all?
Our kind of what I would consider are probably number one measure for success is the the engagement and the experience when somebody comes on board. This is something that like HR and recruiting and IT are aligned on and spend a lot of effort in, is that first experience when somebody comes in and starts at their first day is really important. So on the IT side, our main goal is through whatever means possible, make it a smooth experience as possible. Make sure they understand where to find their user credentials, how to log into the systems, try to automate as much of everything as possible, so that time frame of like, I got my computer, I log into my account, now I can start everything else. There's no hiccups, there's no delay, there's no frustrations, because it's not a great way to start off.
And are you yeah, like I mean, it's been a while since I've been onboarded, right? And things I'm sure are very different, but is that being tracked through like, are there satisfaction questions, like quick survey, something like, do you know?
So we're not doing those yet. We've been talking about to kind of expand in our satisfaction surveys and stuff internally. A lot of it is we meet weekly and sometimes bi-weekly with HR and recruiting, and we have a lot of interaction with training. So there's a lot of pulse checking between those groups, and then we also kind of look at ticket stats for like when users are coming on board. There's a lot of questions, or general questions, or there's this app didn't get installed or whatever. That's something that we pay attention to try and curb in the future. Find those areas of like abrasiveness or frustration, and find a way to eliminate them through either automation or better documentation, or more upfront discussion about something.
I'm curious with the folks watching, how you go about, like, basically how you work with either the stakeholders internally, if you're an internal IT person, or an MSP with your clients, trying to get the sense of onboarding expectations and how you're establishing those. I mean, Nick, you mentioned, especially like with the pace that Ninja has expanded and everything, it's changed a lot. But you've kind of mentioned having that monthly period of kind of reviewing things. But do you all work with HR in order to kind of estimate, okay, here's roughly the amount of new people that we can expect? I mean, I imagine as with any process where you're trying to work with another department or another team, there can be friction there potentially. But is that something you all try to do? Do you try to get like an expectation from not just from the hardware perspective, but from like, okay, yeah, like your staffing and everything too, like here's the workload you're kind of trying to expect?
Yeah. We meet weekly with both HR and recruiting as like kind of a 3-phase thing. So one of it is the upcoming new hires for the next week. Is that all the check boxes checked? Is there any concerns? We go through a pretty rigorous checklist and make sure that we're all on track, that everybody's got what they need. And if there are any issues, we can set expectations, communicate ahead of time. The other part of that is the recruiting discussion, where we do actually talk about, what roles are coming up and what regions, as well as some of like the hiring managers. So like as we are growing and expanding into other regions, it is important for us to understand like, oh, is there new developers going to be in this particular region that we don't normally source that advanced laptop for? And so we coordinate with our procurement team and service desk and HR to make sure that we're on the most pages we possibly can be. We also have an SLO set up for region too. Like this is how many weeks IT needs to properly set up and deploy hardware and all that stuff. And so we pulse check a lot. And then the third part of it is the offboarding. So we're talking about getting the equipment back. That's a coordinated effort between IT and HR. And so that's a weekly sync that we do to stay on top of that.
Okay. Yeah. I'm curious. I mean, how that applies to the folks watching too, if that's something similar for internal IT folks, or just like, is this fall into, on the MSP side, QBR territory or something more frequent? I don't know. I'm curious. But yeah, it seems like it's funny, as a user and everything, and also a hiring manager, you guys make things just seem like magic. And I guess the danger there is on my end, it's like, it seems like, oh yeah, this stuff just happens.
Yeah.
Like, of course they'll just get something.
Yeah, it's true. That's the other, I think just as important as change management as expectation management. So it is hard, if the goal is to automate as much and to make everything as smooth, when you do end up encountering an issue, sometimes it can be elevated because the expectation was like, oh yeah, this just magically happens. But there, and so as long as those times or those points come up, you can take away from that and create an updated expectation, or even just better inform, especially hiring managers, right? So this is another thing that happens too, where maybe you are onboarding a bunch of new people to build your team. A year or two goes by, or 6 months or whatever, you're back in that process again. What changed that you were expecting before? What have you forgot maybe, and all that. So that's part of, that's a challenge too, because IT is not responsible for all of it, but a lot of the processes are based within our scope. So it's communicating with the training department, it's communicating with HR. Maybe it's even as simple as posting Slack messages or sending an email out to all the hiring managers if you're a smaller org to say, hey, by the way, this is how we do things.
It's funny. I mean, yeah, the tech is the one component of it, right? But the communication with people seems to always be the one that's really can be one of the hardest aspects.
Especially the bigger you grow, the harder it becomes.
Well, yeah, and I mean, obviously, with things moving fast too, that expectation setting when all of a sudden people come to you and say, oh, they didn't really know the process. They're expecting it to happen within like a few days or like weeks or whatever. I imagine that can be difficult. Well, I think we'll give folks another chance to ask any other questions, and maybe we'll broaden this out a little bit because Nick, I know that you and I were talking a while ago, and I thought it was so cool that you were actually kind of excited to share with people. Like, you guys have some cool things that you can share about how we eat our own dog food, how you guys are using Ninja and everything. And so I'm curious from folks watching, and we'll put out a poll in Discord too, maybe, different things that you'd be curious about, maybe different types of processes or workflows like onboarding, or if there's anything else like that. And Nick, maybe, I don't know if you had some other examples when we were talking about this topic. We kind of arrived here, but I know there were some other ones that you were kind of considering.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull from the knowledge base of and put it in the context of the offboarding and onboarding, because the application install part is pretty critical. Account setup is pretty critical. And I can speak to kind of at a more advanced level of how to kind of use Ninja as another layer within the context of also applying MDM. So I gave the example of how manual the process was when I first started, and as we worked on trying to build all the different connections and automations, we leverage Intune, or Endpoint Manager, at the top level for our enterprise mobility management. It's technically, because MDM can kind of be, we say MDM and it really means more like mobile devices, and enterprise mobility management is more like the whole the spectrum, so the laptops and desktops and stuff. So what we do now is we provision users into our Azure AD, and then from there we apply at the group level and at the device level, we assign, let's go down the Windows path. We use Autopilot to assign that Windows device to a particular Ninja based on a group. And as part of that process, there's apps that are pushed out. So one of those apps is Ninja. So we auto provision Ninja through Intune, as well as some of our security stack. So that's they're actually logging into that Windows device with their Ninja login. And when they're doing that, as soon as it pops up, the Ninja agent is one of the first things that's installed. And then all of that automation kicks off that the Ninja agent is providing on top of. We try to use the agent for as much as we possibly can to install. It's just, that's going to be another great thing when we do get, EMM for Ninja. Is like, this is going to be such an awesome package all together, because we like using Intune, it's fine or whatever. We'd much prefer it all to be in the platform, single pane of glass. That's the dream, right? So that is like significantly improved our user onboarding. We have it set up for Windows and for Mac, but I mean, as long as there are no issues with the hardware itself, or network connectivity issues, or potentially like a credential password typed in wrong, I mean, like, the process is smooth and it's a good user experience.
Nice. Yeah. Anything that, like, resources in terms of external that you'd recommend, in terms of like that like seeing more about that process, or just things that you go to when you're looking to like get other tips or ideas?
Yeah, I mean, there's always the Reddit is always a decent one to go through. I don't have really a go-to anymore, especially now that the co-pilots and the GTPs of the world are out there, and it's kind of expanded the knowledge base, or the dump into a specific set of place instead of having to drag through the forums and stuff like that. But I mean, you'll find a lot of creative stuff in Reddit. Obviously, if you have access to the dojo, it's an awesome resource for the Ninja. I mean, that's where I've learned 3/4 of what I know about Ninja, other than also like, stealing some stuff from borrowing some stuff from the sales demo environments and other environments. there's some creative scripting out there, conditions, scheduled scripts. I love custom fields. I think that was one of the best things in a while that we put in from like a might not be recognized as such a powerful tool, because of how you can drive different process automations within the platform.
Yeah, and everybody, we'll be sure to add on to this. This is recorded, by the way, for everyone watching, or Jose. I know you came in late. It seems like it is being recorded. You'll be able to watch. Actually, just kind of refresh your page, or once we're done, you'll be able to watch the recording, and we'll add some links in the description to some of these resources. We'll add links to the dojo, to that video I mentioned with Jeff Hunter walking through onboarding. And then there's a couple other things that, Nick, you're giving me ideas for too. So we'll make sure that the description is loaded with good stuff. And then feel free too in the comments to add some things. Well, awesome. Nick, anything else that you wanted to talk about, you wanted to share on this topic or otherwise before we wrap up?
Let me look at what I had. I think we really talked about a lot of the like the onboarding, offboarding stuff that I had on my list. You know, I didn't really get too deep into kind of like the identity provider stuff, because that's actually, you know, one of the critical things that helps us be so fast and move so fast is the how we leverage our identity provider in Okta for like group-based application assignments and stuff like that. Which is totally, I mean, AD is a similar function depending on how you're applying stuff. But I mean, for the corporate IT guys out there, you know, that are maybe thinking about, you know, an IDP, not for the SCIM provisioning alone, not to mention the SSO functionality of it. There's a lot of stuff you can tie in.
Yeah, I mean, depending on how much depth you want to go into, can totally get into a little bit of that now. Can also have you back on and talk to, like, if you want to go really in depth later.
I'd love to get some questions, and then, you know, so I can kind of really dive into them without spilling too much of the secret sauce.
Yeah.
But I mean, SCIM provisioning is really the biggest thing, right? And I mean, there's lots of stuff coming to Ninja. There's lots of stuff that's, you know, already in the pipeline, already out there, to kind of help with this whole process of, like, you know, a user being connected to a device, and how does one, you know, apply application install. Self-service is another one that I'm super interested in, and we're always trying to find more ways to do that, because that takes away from kind of the tier one tickets. So it's a level one or tier one ticket deflection is a huge thing for smaller IT teams as well as larger IT teams, and self-service is a huge portion of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we do have one question that that Robin pointed out that came in earlier in the week when we were talking about this topic. And so this came from a Discord member, and he was asking if anyone has had success connecting Power Automate to Ninja for device provisioning and user onboarding. So again, I kind of, yeah, I don't know if that gives you any thoughts, but basically you've kind of alluded to, like, Ninja slots into this process. It's not the whole thing. You're obviously leveraging Intune, you're leveraging Okta, but yeah, any other, like, any ideas with that? Does that give you kind of gave like a reaction to it?
Yeah, because I have a couple of the guys that have been asking and wanting to kind of get into that a little bit more. We haven't actually, and you know, I might have some, if there's any other team that's watching, they might be screaming at me and say, yeah, we do. There's not anything that I know that we have set up that I can speak to specifically, but it's an interesting topic for sure. Probably, I mean, that would be something that I would be surprised if I didn't see in, like, our demo environment that some of the guys got set up, or you know, the PM guys. Which actually, I'll say that I don't know if we had any PM guys on, or they're been on previous streams or not, but they're another awesome resource, because they were like, most of them were IT guys in a prior life, right? And so they have so many different creative solutions, and you know, we kind of collaborate and piggyback off each other's stuff all the time. So
that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, we have them on a lot, and they're super active in the Discord too. We've got Luke, who's really invested in the ticketing documentation, but the API and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, it's very cool to see everybody. Scott, Mark, Steven, of course. I got now I feel like I have to mention everybody. Greg, Dan, Josh on the MDM side. The list goes on. Okay, here's one from Robert. Robert's awesome, by the way, too, and has he's a great member who is constantly sharing lots of good things. How are you using third-party patching to install software? Do you use custom scripts?
sorry.
Or do you use custom scripts?
I think we have a combination of both. But as some of the applications that we have, a decent portion of them are not within the native third-party patching application list. We are doing a lot of it by script base. Like I said, for Windows, we leverage Chocolatey sometimes, and then we also will do Homebrew with Mac. So like there's VPN clients or whatnot that are not existing in the native patch library to push down to endpoints, but we need them anyways. So we also do leverage Intune for some stuff as well. But like I said, we try to use Ninja as much as possible.
Thanks, Robert, for that question. Good one. Last call, everybody, for questions from Nick. If you want to know the inner workings of Ninja's own IT team, now's your chance to ask questions. And Nick, we're definitely going to have you back at some point, because there's other cool things to share. And I think what we can do too is next time around have pair you with one of the PMs or one of the one of our users here. And so they basically can comment on different approaches and everything.
Yeah, now that I got a kind of a good idea of some of the questions that are asked and whatnot, well, as we go through until this next time, I'll start keeping a list of some nuggets, some interesting stuff to share, just in case people are curious.
Yeah, awesome. That sounds great. And the one of a very popular thing is anytime like you're willing to share scripts at all. I mean, the script share, you mentioned the dojo. There's a ton of people sharing scripts there. And then in Discord too, there's a ton of people sharing scripts. We got Robert, we have Mikey, who shares a ton, David, who's on vacation this week. But yeah, a lot of people sharing stuff there. So if that's something where you ever feel like, your team has something that you're comfortable sharing and everything, you can drop it in there too. And I know people would appreciate it.
Yeah, I got some ideas.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking time. I know you're super busy. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you making everything that I'm doing effortless and seem like magic too. So thank you. And thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with, let's see, Robin's going to have to remind me of our schedule here. I will bring up on screen. We're on the schedule for every 2 weeks. We do a Like a Ninja stream. We're kind of splitting them up between focused on doing something with Ninja and also kind of going more broad with it. And so I know some of the things that we're going to be talking about soon in the coming months are going to be how to do training and upskilling. We're going to have some people who, the next one, thank you, Robin, is how to encourage IT education and certification like a Ninja. So we're going to be having some folks on to share how they motivate their teams and enable their teams to take training and certifications and things like that. We're also going to be doing one on all about hiring. So for those who are looking for a new job or for those hiring managers out there, we're going to have Ninja's own technical recruiter come on and share some advice there. And then, of course, we're going to have some more technical stuff too. We're going to have a NinjaOne partner come in and talk about endpoint hardening and things like that. So lots of good stuff coming your way. But Nick, thank you so much again. Really appreciate it. And we'll have you back on soon.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.